a passionate instigator and dynamic problem solver. Dr. Kevin Ross Emery, the host of the Dr. Kevin Radio Show, will be taking you outside the box, behind the curtain, and identifying the load of BS we are fed every day. And now, Dr. Kevin.
Hello, 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 and welcome to the Dr. Kevin Show here on OMTimes, where you just finished hearing the Om, and it's about time. For here on the Dr. Kevin Show, we are here to help you live better, more inspiring, more motivated, happier lives. Either that or make you laugh a little. One or the other. Well, I guess they're the same thing. Today, we have planetary influences going on today. Planetary influences is all about what influences are the planets up above to make our lives hell. I mean, to make our lives better. That's what I said, right? Right, guys? Better? I did say better, right?
I heard
That's
better.
Right. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So every once a month when we do that, we have Rob Stewart from innercenter.org. That's innercenter.org, who kind of tells us what kind of flying fickle finger of fate is pointing down from the stars at us. What I would like you to remind you is that as we are going in and we're going to hear what's coming up astrologically in our skies, we do not give our power away here to it on the Dr. Kevin Show. We use it as more information with which to make better decisions, because that's what it's all about. Making the best decisions you can. And so the more information you have, the better decisions you can make. But we don't give our power away to psychics, to astrologers, to the Indian chiefs, bakers, politicians, lawyers, preachers, priests, ministers, none of them. You have your power, you keep it, you use it, because guess what? At the end of the day, you're stuck with the result of it. So make your own decisions. Before we get into the astrology, for those of you who are out there that do some form of energy work, do some kind of healing work that can project out or just say a few prayers, I'm not going to go into any details, but my regular co-host, Lori, who's on today to help do astrology, her mother had a little health issue. Again, no details. They're not needed. But I would ask you to send energy, send prayers, send love, send, your favorite tap dance step, whatever you want. But we'd like to support Lori and her mother at this time. Can we just take a minute? Can everybody in the sound of my voice just get quiet for a second? Take a deep breath. Know that we, as part of a connected universe, share each other's joys and sorrows, that connection which brings us together through our heart, our mind, our soul, even our body, that in that web of light that we are all connected to, that we can both send and receive the love, support, and energy from every other person who chooses to send or receive it. At this time, we gather this energy together in love and in joy and in our own divine nature, and we take that web of energy and we send it to Lori's mother at this time, that everything will be working out in her highest and best good. We ask all of this and more. Amen, aho, blessed be, and so it is. So, now, isn't that a great way to start the show?
Thank you.
And I heard a little background in the back of my head, a little Dionne Warwick going, I say a little prayer for you. Sorry. Anyways, moving right along. Lori, Rob, welcome. We're gonna title this Planetary Influence show with a subtitle. The subtitle for this show, and then we'll have Rob tell us all about what's going on in the astrological skies, is the subtitle of this planetary influence is May You Live in Interesting Times, Ancient Chinese Curse. Rob, hit it!
Well, yeah. Well, no, thanks for that, Dr. Kevin. And Lori, I'm sorry to hear about what your mother's moving through, and I hope she recovers well and all that. So,
Thank you.
So the astrology. I was talking with Dr. Kevin before, and you don't really need an astrologer during election time to know that things are intense and sort of building in intensity. And I also, I echo what Dr. Kevin said about not giving one's power away to anyone or anything other than your own inner compass. And I think that's important words. And for me, astrology is simply looking at sort of the energies of the moment and finding ways to work with that in our own life and in accordance with one's own values. But yeah, so there's a lot going on, and sort of don't really know how to start. But I think what I'll say is that there is a new moon today in Virgo, and that's today. And new moons indicate a sort of a new lunar cycle, of course, and it's in Virgo, so it's about analyzing, sort of discerning, being helpful. And it's about communication because the ruler of Virgo is Mercury and in Libra. So there's sort of an emphasis on trying to find balance in relationships, trying to find harmony in relationships. There's a lot of support for doing so at this, in this moment in time. And but through this sort of cycle, this new moon cycle, things will get a bit more intense because there'll be some hard aspects with Mars and the Pluto-Saturn conjunction over the next month. And so particularly in early October, on the full moon on October 1st, and we'll get into that, those sort of details. But today's the new moon in Virgo, and it indicates this sort of new cycle. And the focus is on communication and working with people and seeking to find harmony in those relationships. And we'll get more into the full moon here in a bit. And anytime, Dr. Kevin, Lori, please jump in and clarification and all the rest. So what's interesting in the next month ahead is that a number of planets have been retrograde, which just means that from our perspective here on Earth, those planets appear as if they're moving backwards in our sky. And if, in reality, of course, those planets are not moving backwards. It's just our perception, because we are in an orbit around the sun, just as those planets are. And based on the orbits, we're overtaking them in their orbit, so it appears as though they're moving backwards. And so basically since late April, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto have all been retrograde. Jupiter went direct, which means it's no longer retrograde, it's now moving forward in the sky on September 13th. And so Jupiter's about abundance, it's about expansion in our own life, it's about spiritual, sort of our spiritual lens of the world. And when Jupiter's retrograde, it's a time of reflection, it's a time of inner spiritual growth, sort of reviewing our own compass, our inner truth, really doing the inner work during those periods of time. And now that it's gone direct, it's sort of a time to put it all into action and align with our own true north in our life. And so Jupiter is direct, went direct on September 13th. And Saturn and Pluto will also go direct. Saturn is about limitation in this physical world. It brings restrictions, and it's sort of, we often associate Saturn with some hardships in learning and restriction, maturity, teachers in our life, and our own inner discipline. And so when Saturn is retrograde, as it's been since early May, it's sort of a time where we get to learn about making practical changes in our life. It's about sort of resetting, readjusting to the limitations and restrictions in our life. Much of the lockdown with the COVID was occurring, of course, during that period of time. And so it was a time of sort of, again, reassessing the structures in our own life and finding ways to adjust accordingly. And as it goes direct on September 29th, it's sort of, we get a sort of a blank slate moving forward, and, having to work with that limitation in our own lives, and finding new ways of working with that. And so Pluto goes direct on October 5th. And again, so on the end of September, we have Saturn going direct and Pluto going direct. As Pluto goes direct, it's sort of, there's resurfacing of power issues in our lifetime, in our life. Oftentimes, Pluto represents transformation, regeneration, the deep dredging up of the shadow in our own life. And so with Pluto going direct, there can be sort of resurfacing of working with the power issues in our life. We all are dealing with power in some way or another, learning how to be responsible with our own power, our self-power, and working with others as well. And so with it going direct, we have an opportunity to take what we've learned since late April with these sort of power struggles in our life and apply these different perspectives that we've been learning here over the past five months or so. So these planets are going direct. That sort of sets the stage here for some of the things astrologically that are occurring. Any questions on any of that, Lori, Dr. Kevin, at all, before I move into sort of the sun and energies entering Libra?
No, you did a great job explaining that, I think. And I'm a novice pretty much at this, so.
So
yeah,
my question is, I would actually like to ask each of you, what have you learned about your own power since April? What have you learned about your power since April? I mean, we've had this period, and we're now going to go out of it, and we're going to be moving into this new heightened knowledge of our own power and potentially end up in power struggles because of it. I think that that's a valid question that our listeners should be asking themselves, kind of like, what have I learned? What can I use to manage these interesting times from this period? I mean, is this a good question, or am I off track here?
No, I think it's a great question.
Yeah. I think it's a question everybody should be asking themselves. So.
Yeah, and the thing I would add to it, without answering it myself at this point, is that Pluto also represents the sort of compulsive things that we are drawn to in our life. And so, to look over the last 5 months and see, where have I been compulsively and subconsciously diving into and either spinning my wheels or whatever it is, there might be something we've learned about our own subconscious compulsions the past 5 months. And to really evaluate that and think, okay, how can I find a better way to work with those sort of tendencies and subconscious things that have shown up over the past 5 months. And so, for me personally, I mean, I think, standing in one's own truth and doing so in not a aggressive way, but just more of this is how I see the truth, and this is how, and I choose to stand in that, so that those sorts of ways for me is something I've been learning in the last few months.
Well, I think that one of the things you said that's very powerful that we need to be aware of is there's a difference between standing in one's truth and feeling the need to force other people to validate it.
Absolutely.
And that's where we get in trouble. Somehow, it isn't about standing in our truth. It's our need to have others validate or by agreeing with it. If we can just say, hey, that's your truth and this is my truth, and let's agree to disagree, then let's find the places where we can cross and still work together. You know, it's like saying, hey, we can't work together unless you think blue is the best color, because I think blue is the best color. And you must agree with me that it's blue's the best color or we can't work together. And as ludicrous as that sounds, this is the core of so much of our conflict. It's about not finding the mutual beneficial ways in which we can make the world a better place, but getting hooked up on whether blue is the best color or green or yellow. And those are just symbolic representations of things. But this is where we keep stubbing our toe and we keep falling on our face as a species. That we have this inherent need. And the problem is, or the truth of the matter is, if you really stand in your own truth and believe it to be truth and are solid in it, you don't give a shit whether anybody else agrees with you or not, because it doesn't make any difference.
Amen.
So all the people that are fighting with you to validate their truth is because they're so insecure in it. Yeah. I mean, does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, I think that's really well said. And with Mars retrograde now, we'll actually speak quite a lot about this. You know, we sort of have this belief that we have to fight for our truth and have other people agree with it, and we don't. Like you said, there's many colors in the world. You know, yellow, blue, green, whatever, and you know, we don't all have to agree on the details. You know.
I happen to think chartreuse is a lovely shade. And on that note, we're going to take our first break. We're going to come back, hear more about what's going on in planetary influences, and see if we can convince Lori to share what she's learned since April, because she's being all mysterious on this question. And we'll be right back here on the Dr. Kevin Show.
Conscious media for conscious minds. OMTimes. Have you ever wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free today at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
A social distancing tip.
While the CDC urges you to avoid close contact, like hugging or shaking hands, there are other non-physical ways to say hello. Wave, wink, use sign language, salute, smile, give the peace sign, throw up an air high five, do jazz hands. Remember, stay a minimum of 6 feet or 2 arms length away from others, and stay home if you can. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #alone together. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Hello, and welcome back to the Dr. Kevin Show, where Rob is giving us insights from the astrological perspective so that we may make better decisions in this upcoming time of turbulence and crisis known as America and elections. I will vomit now. And moving right along, do remember this is a live call-in show, so if you have questions for our astrologer, if you have questions for Lori or I, if you just want to call and say, hey, I have somebody out there that needs a little love and energy sent their way, we'll do that on the Dr. Kevin Show too, because we're all about fun, bright, witty, sassy, and loving energy. So if you want a little loving on for somebody, call 202-570-7057, and we will do our best to send some loving on vibrations. So, Miss Lori.
Yes, Dr. Kevin.
Yeah, could you tell I had some coffee this afternoon? Yeah, I got a new Keurig. You wouldn't believe how many pods I've gone through. Anyways, so what do you think your big lesson was before we go back into the astrology? Because I think when we share our lessons, it helps other people. What did you learn about your power since April?
I have a lot of it.
Yes, you do, honey.
I have a lot of it. And
you do.
And there's a couple things. Being alone is okay. It's a good thing. We should all learn to do it. Not, it's good to be social, but it's also good to be alone. Something a lot of people struggle with. And to make your own decisions, not to let other people influence your decisions. You have to, like you guys were saying earlier, you have to stand in your own power. And it's not our job to correct everybody. It's just our job to live our truth and do what we think is best and act how we think is best and to love each other. I guess those are things I've always lived by, but they're just even more reinforced since you have a lot of alone time to think about these things. And taking care of yourself. I'm stunned at how many people have wasted this opportunity to get to know and love themselves. And that's really all I've been focusing on, that and my family, of course. That's what I've learned through this.
Yeah.
Good for you. And I think it's really important, and then we're going to get back to Rob's astrology. I based on our show from last week, that I had a client who was almost in tears as she was telling me how much that this time of COVID has allowed her to connect and have a better, deeper, more meaningful relationship with her teenage children, and what a blessing it has been. And I thought of you because of our conversations last week. So I wanted to share that there are people that are going, yes, it's horrible that these people are dying. It's horrible that we have such jackasses running our country, which means there are many more people dying than maybe needed to. But I'm going to find the blessing. And I found the blessing that my children and I got to connect on a more deeper, more meaningful level and have the best relationship we've ever had. So I thought, great. So, Rob, what else is that astrology out there doing to screw us over? Let's hear it.
All right. Well, so the sun. We do this show every time the sun moves into a new sign. The sun represents our core principles, our sort of intentions that help maintain our sanity and our authenticity. And so the natal placement of your sun represents this in a big way for your whole life. But as the sun transits through these different signs throughout the year, we get to experience and work with these different types of energies of the zodiac. And so the sun enters Libra on September 22nd. And the sun's been in Virgo for the past month. And Virgo is about service. It's about helping others. It's about healing. It's about trying to make the world a better place, fixing, discerning, analyzing, perfecting something, and focusing on the details. So as the sun enters Libra here on the 22nd, Libra's about, again, its focus is on relationship with others. And Libra is really about trying to find balance. It's not about balance itself. Sometimes in astrology terminology, it's associated with balance, but from my perspective, it's about seeking balance, because Libra is continuously seemingly out of balance, and it's trying to seek it and find harmony with others. And so Libra is about striving for fairness, equality, balance. It's about listening and relating to others, taking in other points of view, sharing oneself, trying to find middle ground. It's about putting oneself in another's shoes, and it's about developing boundaries too. With values, there's a relativity about values. That some people value some things and we value other things. Libra's about learning how to sort through that whole landscape of the relativity and subjectivity of what people value. And so for the next month, this is going to be a big theme, and we'll get into that as well. But Libra is ruled by Venus, which represents how we form relationships, how we find harmony with others. And Venus is currently in Leo until October 3rd. And so when Venus is in Leo, which is for the next 2.5 weeks, we have the opportunity to find that balance in our relationships with others, while sort of balancing our Leo tendencies. The Leo tendencies are sort of my way or the highway. It's very expressive. Can be very boisterous and loud. And so of course, we can all be loud, so can other people. And so it's just balancing one's own loudness with the loudness of others. Finding positive ways of expressing oneself is a big theme with that. We'll have opportunities of finding that balance with others, and with our Leo represents the ego, finding balance with the egos in our life, including our own. And then Venus enters Virgo on October 2nd, and at which point relationship might sort of more focus on helping others, trying to be of service of some way. Virgo can also be very picky and discerning and critical of oneself and others. So there's, the energies in October really get a little more tricky to navigate. But with Venus and Virgo, it's sort of a time to discern, the choices and related to relationships, of course, because the sun is in Libra. And so there's just a lot of interrelating opportunities going on for us to transform through. And speaking of transformation, one of the big things that's occurring now and for the next 2 months is that Mars is now retrograde, which again it appears as though it's moving backwards in the sky. Of course, it's not moving backwards in reality. It's just the perception of it. But Mars is our willpower, it's our action, it's our assertion, it's our energy, it's our passion and anger. And it's right at home in fiery Aries. And it's been in Aries since the end of June of this year. So there's just been a lot of fiery sort of energy available for all of us in our lives. And Mars can be really strong and forceful in Aries, and even aggressive. We've seen, a lot of sort of aggressions in a lot of different forms over these past, 3 months or so. And so when Mars is retrograde, we have the opportunity to lay down our sword in ways that we typically assert ourselves. Oftentimes when Mars is retrograde, sort of, the things that there's delays, there's timeouts, basically forced timeouts. Our own willpower wants to move forward, but there's just sort of a delay, a universal pause in things. And so it's a time of really letting go of our individual willpower and trusting in the willpower of the cosmos, the greater power, I guess, of the universe, and whatever form that means to everyone. But it's a time of surrendering our own individual willpower, to let go, to surrender and trust the unfolding of the universe. And the saying, not my will, but yours be done, really speaks to that perfectly, because our own individual willpower might be disappointing at times. That things may not work out the way that each of us individually want them to. So it's a great time an opportunity to surrender. And this gets into what we were speaking about earlier, Dr. Kevin, in that, oftentimes when someone disagrees with us, we feel that if we don't put up a fight, somehow we're losing, or somehow we're being subordinate in some way, or something like that. It's this weird, arguments bring up this weird sort of energy amongst people. And so Mars retrograde gives us the opportunity that when we all disagree, when people are disagreeing, we don't have to be combative about it. Why waste that time and energy? And so sometimes with Mars retrograde, there can be a lot of anger, but it's sort of internalized. So it's just a good time to be aware of the anger that's being expressed, and to understand the anger that you have, but also just to surrender into the flow of the universe, and just knowing that there might be delays, there might not be, our willpower is sort of held back a bit in some ways during this period of time, and just to know that, I think, can be helpful. So with Mars retrograde, there can be changes and reversals and adjustments related to things associated with force and willpower, such as like police or the military, even professional sport leagues, or the sport industry. There might be reversals or changes related to those types of things. All sorts of Mars-ruled areas of life may undergo some type of reversal or reassessment or adjustment in some way. And Mars will be squaring Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter, which means it makes a 90-degree angle with those in the sky. And so this really does bring up some of the real restrictions and transformations that are occurring in each of our lives. And we'll have opportunities to find healthier ways of asserting ourselves that are not from a place of ruthless ambition or from a place of the ends justify the means. We get to sort of practice our self-discipline and surrender in a mature way, and open to the possibilities of renewal and regeneration. But there can be a lot of tension, there can be a lot of strife and difficulty, because everyone's, it's as if everybody's trying to walk in molasses and run their sprints, but they can only walk, and frustrated because they can't sprint. So simply being aware of this, I think, helps work with this type of energy. Easier said than done, of course.
Well, one thing I want people to remember about walking in molasses is, if you stop on a regular basis and eat some of it, it's all sugar, and it will give you the energy to keep going forward.
That's a good point.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying. I do want to actually make another comment that might be taken a little more seriously, though. If you think about it, there was truth in what I said.
Yeah.
Stop and digest the stickiness.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually being serious here.
Yeah.
Stop and digest the stickiness.
Yes, absolutely.
And stopping and digesting the stickiness. See what's holding you back. See what's causing the problem. Take a deep breath. Be patient. And then be willing to say, okay, I got it. I can move forward a little bit more now. But don't fight against it. Go with it. And it will be easier.
Yeah.
You know, something cancels, something goes backwards, something happens. Say, what do I do with this time? What do I do with this energy? What do I do with these resources? Don't fight it. Flow with it. Now, let go, let God, which is part of what I heard you say. I will, thy will, my will. The thing I want to point out to people is to understand your interpretation of God's will is you, not God. It's your interpretation of God's will. And no matter what book or tome or belief system you take it from, that's your interpretation of it. That's you, imperfect man, interpretation of it. And so you really want to surrender to God? Know that God will take care of the sinners. Know that God will take care of those people that need some redirection. Know that God, nowhere along the way, said, hey, I've been kind of slacking. Can you go out there and kick their ass for me? No, that's all your stuff. That's all your constipated, power struggle, insecure, need to be a bully crap, and don't blame that on God. Don't say you're doing God's will when you're basically just being a jackass in the name of the good book, whichever good book it is. I just wanted to throw that in. Go ahead.
I think that's well said. I feel like, surrendering to God involves simply surrendering to this moment. That's it. Like total, absolute surrender now to this moment, the way it is here now. I think it's a really good point. So,
Laurie, you want to add anything?
Well, the only thing I have to that is I am a big believer in God wants partners, not dependents. So you can give it to God or leave it to God and but you can't be lazy. You can't sit there and say, well, I'm just letting God do everything. No, you have to do something. You have to be part. You have to make an effort, like, I don't know, someone who wants to be an actress. Well, I'm just going to leave it up to God. Well, no, you still have to go on auditions. You still have to practice your craft. You still have to try. So that's the flip side. People are like, well, I'm just going to let God handle it. No, you have to do something too. So you can't just sit back but then, like you said on your side, the people who are taking it to the extreme, saying I'm doing God's will by doing these heinous acts. No.
Okay, we're on break.
Well said.
We'll be back, and we're gonna let Rob get more of this astrological out, and maybe we'll stop interrupting him, but not likely. Here on the Dr. Kevin Show.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill, while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
911, what is your emergency?
The kid shot himself.
All right, where's the wound, sir?
911, what's your emergency?
Please help. My son shot his brother.
911, what is your emergency?
Okay.
911, please state your emergency.
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns.
It wasn't locked.
Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Hello, 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 and welcome back to the last segment of the Dr. Kevin Show this week, where we're doing Planetary Influences with Rob Stewart of innercenter.org and Lori Powers-Otto, my semi-full-time co-hostess. You're on 2 shows a month. Maybe we should up it to 3. I don't know. But she has informed us that God wants partners, multiple partners. So I'm trying to decide... Is he polygamous or is she just promiscuous? And which side of God are we talking about? But I'm going to let you think about that as Rob moves forward with more astrology. Rob, go ahead.
Well, yeah, no, it was a really great point, Lori. Before I move forward, I just want to mention that I'm offering 25% off my evolutionary astrology sessions. It's a 90-minute session. And it's 25% off here for the next couple days. So if anyone's interested in looking at their evolutionary astrology, which is sort of the evolution of from lifetime to lifetime, that's indicated in the birth chart according to this practice, you can check out my Facebook page, which is Inner Center Hypnosis. I do hypnosis work to help people let go of the negative thinking and the old patterns so that they can embrace, achieve their goals and embrace the change that they want. So you can check out my Facebook page if you're interested in that deal. So,
Rob,
right,
if I have hypnosis with you, Rob, to let go of a negative pattern and embrace a new change, does that mean that I can guaranteedly get rid of Trump and replace him with Biden? That's definitely a negative pattern replaced with a good change. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Well, that's. Oh boy. Well, speaking of those two guys, so I didn't look into this very in depth, but of course, there's a Mars retrograde. And for Trump, Mars is in Aries. It's retrograding in Aries. For Trump, Aries rules his 9th house. And so there might be some tensions and strife and sort of battles of will with regard to the 9th house rules sort of the way in which he sees the world and interprets the world and asserts himself in the world through his the beliefs that he has. And so there might be some adjustments in that for him during this period of time. For his chart, natal Mars sits right on the ascendant. So Mars themes, assertion and aggression, those types of themes are a big part of his life and his based in the astrology. And so a retrograde in his 9th house, with Mars moving to the 8th house, there might be some reversals and adjustments with regards to how he acts from the lens in which he sees the world. So, the Saturn-Pluto-Jupiter conjunctions in his 5th house, which is creating a square to Mars in 9th. And so the 5th house is about self-expression and ego battles. So areas in those, there might be some transformation that's occurring and creating friction in those areas in how he asserts himself through the framework in which he sees the world. What's also interesting is the 9th house also relates to foreign countries and foreign cultures. And maybe perhaps there could be some reversal in his stance regarding some overseas conflicts or things like that. Who knows? But those are some of the themes also in that area. And for Joe Biden, Aries rules his fifth house of self-expression, performance, and fifth house is about ego battles. It's about asserting one's ego and expression. And so there might be some adjustments that he's making in terms of how he communicates, or maybe some reversals in his opinions or the ways that he asserts himself in different ways. So, and then his retrograde Mars in the fifth house is squared by the Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter in the second, which could mean there's some transformations occurring in his own value system, maybe some self-esteem and proving himself, some transformation occurring there. That's creating friction in the way in which he expresses himself on sort of the stage and the spotlight. And so there's just a lot of, when you talk about politics, of course, there's a lot of, unfortunately, there's a lot of ego involved, as we all know. And, certainly over the next month or so, there's going to be flare-ups in those ways for everybody, and we get to choose how we work with that and approach that in a healthy way. So on October 1st, unless you have a question and you just want to chat about that stuff, I'm sure we can talk for a while about all that.
I'm going to have you finish up the astrology, and then if we have time, we'll go back to it. I just want to make sure you get everything covered.
Okay. Right. All right. Thanks. So October 1st, we have a full moon in Aries, and so this is sort of a time where it might be a peak of some of these strifes and challenges related to communication and assertion and Mars retrograde and all of this. The full moon is conjunct Chiron. Chiron is an asteroid, which represents our inner child sensitivities. So we might, it's a great time to do sort of the inner child work, to really provide the love and care for that inner child that may not know how to assert itself, or maybe the inner child that expresses assertion through aggression. But it's a way of working with that inner child and really being gentle with yourself, because there's just a lot of fiery energy, over this next month. And so speaking of communication, Mercury goes retrograde on October 14th, and will be retrograde until November 4th. And that's in Scorpio. So Mercury is associated with how we think. It's associated with communication, inflow, outflow of information. It's how we perceive the world, observation of the world, and our thinking patterns. And when it is retrograde, it's a time to sort of slow. It's a time to slow down. And with Mars retrograde, the extra time to slow down. But it's a time of reassessing, reevaluating. It's not the best time to start a new venture, new ideas. It's better. It's not ideal for that. Of course, you have to do what you have to do in your life, and we all have. But it's known for being a time of reviewing, reminiscing, and sometimes in Mercury retrograde we don't have all the information. Not all the information is in, we're sort of, we might be not seeing the whole picture regarding, these new directions in our life. These are some of the ways in which people talk about Mercury retrograde. But it's a time to move slowly and taking time with all that. And so Scorpio is about commitment, and can be about the fear of entrapment. It's about diving deep into psychology of ourselves, like psychology of others. But being retrograde, it's about looking at our inner psychological life, looking at our motives, our intentions, Scorpio can be very compulsive. So again, some of this fiery communication and all that, it's just something to be mindful of in your communication with others. And so it's just in general a time to slow down, to review, to read the fine print of things and not gloss over things. It's just a time to really focus inwardly and take your time with the things that are occurring in your life. And that, I believe, is all I was going to talk about.
So, Miss Lori, you're up first. Questions, thoughts, things that you wanted to highlight or put a little jizz on, a little, sparkle or whatever for Mr. Rob and our upcoming astrological mess?
So I am a little confused, and that's just because I'm me. So if you are Scorpio and Mars is going retrograde in Scorpio, how's that work?
Right. So,
Mars is not going retrograde in Scorpio. Mercury is, correct?
Mercury. I'm sorry.
Mercury.
Right. I apologize.
Right. And so, it's really, it can have sort of a real, the sun sort of shines its light onto whatever is nearby. And of course, with Mercury transiting through Scorpio, if your sun is there, which mine is, sort of our own sanity and authenticity is really focused on that Mercury, those sort of inner psychological lookings into our own life. Those can be a real big theme for those that are born during the Scorpio sun period. But they're working in harmony together. Yeah.
So when Mercury is retrograde in Scorpio, there can also be a real time of trying to know that there is transformation coming, knowing that that things are shifting, changes, that you are experiencing a death birth cycle, but it's all very internalized, and you're trying to figure out the language, like what are you trying to let go of, and in letting go of it, what are you bringing in? Who am I leaving behind? Who am I becoming? Depending on what house your sun is in, may show the area of the life that the death and rebirth is happening. I've got Scorpio rising, so this is all going on in my 12th, and I don't think it actually crosses the line over my thing, because I'm at like 27 degrees Scorpio, and I don't think Mercury goes that far, but I could be wrong. But would you say that was a fair assumption, Rob, how I was explaining that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then in the 12th house, there's a lot of, that's occurring in a big way in the 12th house of the subconscious, and just doing, it's a great time for inner work, Mercury retrograde.
Did that make sense to you, Lori? Did I answer your question? Did Rob answer your question?
Yes, you guys did. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. A lot of what's going on, guys, and Rob, as always, I want to thank you for sharing your insights and wisdom and knowledge around astrology and the planetary influences, because these are trying times. These are troubling times. These are times of great shift and change in who America is, who Americans are, which way are we going to go, how are we going to move, and anything that can give us any kind of insight or guidance to maybe why we're feeling what we're feeling, or thinking what we're thinking, or what we're seeing. If we can recognize and become more self-aware of both where we're part of the problem and where we're part of the solution, because we all get to claim a little bit of both. No one gets to be all solution, and no one actually gets to be all problem. And when we recognize that, and we recognize, okay, maybe there are some places where I got caught into old stuff, or maybe some places where I needed to stand up, or maybe I needed to sit down. And, you know, we are at a very turbulent time with COVID and Black Lives Matter and the whole thing around the police, which people keep on, they keep on playing with it so that half the people that talk about it sound foolish because they're making it sound like the move is to get rid of police altogether, and that's not the move. There's a lot of fast-talking people, and they all seem to gravitate towards Washington, D.C. And they tend to go towards the media, and they intentionally keep us confused at times. There's an intentionality. But next week, join me and Matt Connerton, and we're going to talk about the Anti-American Corruption Act and what we can do on a state level to change what's going on in D.C. If you'd like to see a better government, tune in next week and learn about the Anti-Corruption Act and what you can do to make true, lasting change and return us closer to the country we were created to be. Rob, thank you for coming. Lori, you're welcome to jump in next week if you want to call in and be part of the conversation.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Yep. Take care, you guys.